The light in the courtroom was flat and cold, the kind that makes people look pale and tired. It took away the color and emotion from everyone inside. What used to be private fights and reality TV drama was now being discussed under legal lights, turned into facts and evidence. Rob Warne, a familiar face from TV and film, walked into court in handcuffs. Not long ago, he had been a charming star on 90 Day Fiancé, but now he was facing serious charges. Just 2 days before, he was still living the strange mix of real life and performance that reality TV creates, part real, part acted. Then everything changed. Old arguments turned into legal complaints, and private betrayals became part of a criminal case. Sophie Sierra had filed a $500,000 divorce claim in the same courthouse, turning what might have been a personal breakup into a public financial fight. Reports that she had been secretly involved with another man, Pedro, added another layer of drama. Some said the affair had gone on for a long time and had been kept secret, giving the whole story a darker tone. What started as whispers became a scandal filled with betrayal, strategy, and possible legal trouble. This was more than a celebrity breakup. It was a lesson in how private love, public image, and bad decisions can mix into something much bigger. The fall from fame had the same energy reality TV always looks for. But this time there were no producers to control the story. Rob and Sophie's relationship had started like many others on television. Two people who met on a show and fell in love. But behind the edited storylines and romantic scenes, there was a more complicated reality. Editing can create sympathy and drama, but it can't show the slow loss of trust that happens off camera. People close to them said that when the cameras were off, life was tense. Nights were filled with arguments about money, stress from media appearances, and growing silence between them. Rob had seemed like the perfect partner on TV. Charming, funny, and caring, but off camera, those same traits turned into insecurity and frustration. Sophie, seen as both beautiful and strong, found it hard to express the deeper sadness and exhaustion that came with their situation. Little problems built up over time. Missed payments, short conversations, and secrets started to fill the space between them. The public expected their breakup to follow a familiar TV pattern, a short montage, emotional confessions, and a new storyline. But what happened next was far messier and much more serious. Rumors that Sophie had been seeing Pedro for a long time turned the private breakup into a story with real consequences. Social media began investigating. Photos, timelines, and even body language were analyzed by fans and gossip accounts. Pedro was not just anyone. He was a known TV personality. His involvement made everything bigger and more public. The story became a triangle of three public figures, each with their own following, each being judged not just for their choices, but for what those choices represented. Some saw Sophie's connection with Pedro as emotional support after a difficult marriage. Others believed it was a calculated move to gain power or revenge. As usual, the truth was complicated. Both sides gave their versions of the story. Some people said Sophie and Pedro's relationship was new and genuine. Others insisted it had been going on for much longer. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and the fight over what was real and what was performance became a weapon. When Sophie's $500,000 divorce claim was filed, the tone changed completely. $500,000 isn't just money, it's a statement. It meant she wanted recognition, security, and power in a situation where she felt betrayed. Supporters said she deserved it after what she had gone through. Rob's defenders said it was unfair and cruel. The media turned it into a symbol, a woman demanding justice or a man being punished beyond reason. Then, 2 days before an important divorce hearing, Rob was arrested. The charges were gambling and fraud. The timing shocked everyone and made the story explode even more. To the public, it looked like another reality TV twist. Dramatic, sudden, and full of scandal. Prosecutors claimed Rob had been involved in dishonest financial dealings, listing transactions, and bets as proof. His lawyers said it was all just bad business decisions and financial instability, common in entertainment careers where income is unpredictable. Inside the courtroom, the case slowed down. Legal terms like intent and cause replaced the emotional headlines. But outside, the story kept growing. The man who had once been loved for his vulnerability and charm was now seen as a criminal. Questions started forming quickly. Did Sophie help the police? Did she share documents that led to the arrest? Some believed she cooperated to protect herself and get clarity. Others thought she had done it out of revenge or strategy. Social media and tabloids filled in the gaps with their own stories. Some accused her and Pedro of plotting Rob's downfall. Others said the timing was just coincidence. Pedro's involvement made the rumors worse. Because he was a public figure, every action he took was judged more harshly. For people who wanted Rob to be proven innocent, Pedro became an easy target, a villain in a story that might have been more about money and misunderstanding than personal hate. But for others, he was just caught in a situation he didn't start. The lines between what caused what became blurry. Public stories often confuse coincidence with intention. And in this case, it was nearly impossible to separate emotional truth from public image. As the trial moved forward, the courtroom stayed quiet, slow, and serious, while the outside world turned every update into a headline. The same cameras that had once made Rob and Sophie famous now watched their downfall. People argued about who was really at fault. Some said Rob's mistakes brought everything on himself. Others believed Sophie and Pedro had turned personal pain into public punishment. The truth was likely somewhere in between. Behind the headlines, it was still a human story. Two people who once cared for each other caught in a web of fame, money, and public judgment. What had started as a love story on television had ended as a legal case in real life. For everyone involved, the difference between performance and reality had disappeared. The show was over, but the consequences were real. When a spouse decides to give the police documents, it is often seen as a moral judgment instead of a necessary step in a family dispute, especially when money is involved. Motive was argued not only in court, but also in louder and harsher places online, where influencers and commentators prefer simple stories over complex legal ones. The media played a big role in shaping the narrative. Reality TV had already trained audiences to see human drama as an ongoing series. The moment criminal charges were added, what could have been a private breakup became a case study in public exposure. Every leak was exaggerated. Every claim was made louder and clear. Confident opinions were rewarded more than careful or uncertain ones. Fans divided into groups. Some believed the situation was the fair unraveling of long-term lies. Others thought it was a plan to destroy a man's career and life. Many watched out of habit, treating it as just another spectacle. Journalists who tried to report carefully found their work drowned out by viral clips and opinion pieces that turned the situation into a simple morality play for social media. Public opinion moved much faster than the legal system's slower and more detailed process. In court, the case turned into a question of proof and motive. Prosecutors presented betting records, bank transactions, and messages that they said showed a clear pattern of dishonesty. Defense lawyers argued that Rob had simply made bad financial decisions and had terrible luck, not that he intended to commit a crime. Trials are not free from storytelling either. Scripts are written, witnesses appear, and even though the courtroom is ruled by standards of evidence, it can feel like another stage for drama. Outside of court, the public acted as its own jury, turning complex issues into yes or no answers through viral posts and interviews. The patience of the legal process clashed with the public's quick need for resolution. The consequences were wide and lasting. Rob's career and finances were immediately at risk. The arrest and the wave of publicity destroyed job offers that had relied on his once friendly public image. The divorce filing remained a legal tool, but also became a public symbol that made private negotiation harder. Sophie's image also suffered. Although she claimed she was only asking for what she was owed and for protection, many critics saw her as opportunistic. People argued endlessly about who held more power and who had been more vulnerable. Pedro's involvement added another layer. His role in the story made him an easy target for blame, and the damage to his reputation might not be reparable, even if he were cleared of any wrongdoing. Altogether, their story became a warning about the risks of mixing private intimacy with public life. The line between legal responsibility and personal revenge grew blurry, and the public consumed the story faster than anyone could separate truth from rumor. as time went on, the loud headlines faded into procedural updates. The fast pace of gossip gave way to slower reports about legal motions, hearings, and negotiations. The language shifted from dramatic accusations to careful legal terms. Instead of emotional public arguments, the discussions turned into quieter debates about settlements and the possible civil resolution of financial disputes. The damage went beyond reputation or money. It was personal and deeply human. Each of them had to reconsider who they were after years of living part of their identities in front of cameras. Relationships that once seemed strong and public now needed either painful repair in private or the final clarity of legal separation. The point of the story is not to label anyone as purely good or bad. It's to show how public exposure magnifies private mistakes, how media prefers simple stories over complex truths, and how the law tries to turn emotion into evidence. If Rob Warne truly committed fraud or gambling crimes, that truth will only come out through slow, careful legal work that takes far longer than the public's attention span. The truth about Sophie and Pedro's relationship will never be entirely clear, because intimacy is complicated and social media tends to divide people into heroes and villains. When private lives are exposed, the boundary between accountability and compassion blurs. People make quick moral judgments, but those involved are left to live with the consequences long after the public has moved on. The slow process of law and emotional healing will decide how this story ends, whether in closure, a settlement, or a trail of lingering consequences that never fully disappear. After Rob's arrest, the story shifted to the long and detailed unraveling that followed. The focus moved from spectacle to legal strategy, discovery battles, and the human cost behind them. Financial exposure became a key issue. Investigators and lawyers examined bank records, betting ledgers, and asset trails, showing how public figures' finances can be used against them in both divorce and criminal cases. The media remained deeply involved, shaping how the public saw every step. Reporters, influencers, and TV producers all influenced the story, turning private conflict into serialized entertainment. Sophie's actions and Pedro's role were examined through the lenses of motive, comfort, loyalty, and power. The public saw morality in black and white, while the legal world had to deal with shades of gray. Reputation in one space often conflicted with truth in another. The long-term effects were clear. Careers suffered. Alliances shifted. Settlement talks changed shape. Everyone involved had to rebuild not only their public images, but also their sense of identity. The unraveling of Rob, Sophie, and Pedro became a story about the collapse that follows fame and the slow recovery that few people watch. In the first few weeks after Rob's arrest, the headlines were loud, but the real work was quiet. Subpoenas, discovery requests, and forensic accounting replaced the online shouting. Every simple choice in his financial life now had to be explained in legal terms. The case became a map of tiny details, bank transfers, text messages, receipts, all small clues that built a larger picture. Rob's lawyers shifted their focus quickly. The public humiliation of his arrest had already damaged his career. Now the goal was to calm the legal fight and control the story. The defense strategy had two main parts: challenging the evidence and reshaping the narrative. His legal team filed motions to question the validity of the arrest, requested that evidence be preserved, and asked the court to exclude certain communications they claimed were gathered without a proper warrant. They studied how investigators linked his betting accounts to his personal ones, searching for mistakes in the chain of custody or data collection. At the same time, they began carefully rebuilding Rob's public image. Selective interviews and statements portrayed him not as a criminal, but as someone who had made poor financial choices under pressure. The line between legal defense and public relations blurred until they became almost the same thing. Behind the scenes, forensic accountants and private investigators did quiet but essential work. While tabloids offered easy headlines about secret lovers, staged arrests, and revenge, the accountants pieced together the real financial picture. They analyzed overdrafts, high-interest loans, and patterns of money transfers that might show Rob trying to cover losses rather than steal. But even those spreadsheets could be read in more than one way, depending on who was looking for what. If someone kept moving money from a joint account to a betting site, It could look like either an addiction problem or an intentional theft of cash. Both stories sounded believable, and both would be fiercely debated in court. Sophie had her own complicated legal strategy. Her lawyers worked on two fronts. One to get her the civil protection she wanted through the divorce settlement, and another to cooperate with criminal authorities in a way that wouldn't make her legally vulnerable. Legally, cooperating with or against a spouse is a risky choice. In some places, spousal privilege makes it hard to force one partner to testify. In others, giving up that privilege or being involved in criminal behavior tied to shared income can cancel that protection. Sophie decided to give documents and statements that showed how the money had moved and what certain transactions meant. Her lawyer said she did the right thing to protect herself and anyone else affected by Rob's alleged actions, including potential dependents. To many people watching, her cooperation looked like a responsible act from someone who had been harmed. To others, it looked like a calculated move, an attempt to win both the civil and criminal sides of the case through strategy. Pedro's position was both public and private. He denied having anything to do with the legal proceedings and insisted that his relationship with Sophie was separate from it all. Still, his name stayed attached to the case as the other man, which changed how people saw him. To manage that, Pedro hired a lawyer who specialized in reputation protection, a niche field that combines defamation law, strategic media management, and social media control. His lawyer sent letters to media outlets denying claims that he was involved in any legal strategy against Rob. But in today's world, a lawyer's letter rarely changes public opinion. Life inside the courthouse became the new rhythm for everyone involved. Commentators live-streamed scheduling hearings, and the appointment of an expert witness became the topic of online think pieces. Even simple legal procedures turned into content. Prosecutors tried to connect scattered events into one story of deception, multiple bank accounts, hidden transfers, and betting patterns suggesting concealment. The defense responded with different explanations: mislabeled transactions, ordinary hedging behavior common in gambling, and a lack of criminal intent. Depending on which soundbite went viral that day, public opinion swung back and forth. The court documents couldn't capture how the people themselves were changing. Friends said Rob looked more tired than angry, drifting between denial and shock over how fame had become a burden. Sophie appeared calm and professional in public, though privately she faced constant criticism about her motives. Her social life changed as people watched and judged. Pedro, though less tied to the original TV franchise, was still publicly condemned, not for any proven wrongdoing, but for the moral role he played as the other name in a public divorce. Their social circles shrank. Friends took sides or stayed away altogether, afraid of becoming part of the story. The media's constant hunger for updates created a loop of attention. Each new filing was summarized, reposted, and discussed. Leaks, whether planned or accidental, shaped the story dramatically. A partial bank statement given to a reporter could fuel hours of commentary mixing law, gossip, and moral outrage. Online personalities with no legal training offered fast judgments, creating pressure on both traditional journalists and the parties themselves. The defense realized that their legal arguments were being debated online before they were even made in court. They had to adjust. Their strategy shifted toward faster, simpler public responses that could protect Rob's image from the harshest headlines. The financial part of the divorce remained crucial. Sophie demanded $500,000, and that amount meant everything. Both her real assets and her public reputation had to be evaluated. For celebrities, reputation itself is a kind of currency, turning into income through brand deals, appearances, and sponsorships. Rob's arrest made those opportunities vanish. His lawyer argued that paying Sophie's full demand would be impossible without giving up future earnings, which were already damaged by the criminal case. Sophie's team countered that she needed financial protection right away. They said the settlement should reflect the lifestyle they once shared and compensate for the public damage caused by the accusations. Mediators were brought in, and offers and counteroffers began. These weren't just about money. They included promises not to publicly insult each other, agreements about privacy, and potential co-parenting arrangements. Every line of a draft agreement became a small battle over control of the narrative. Another key issue was how gambling behavior relates to criminal responsibility. Many people confuse gambling addiction with fraud, and this misunderstanding adds stigma. Advocates for addiction treatment argued that problem gambling is a public health issue that needs therapy, not punishment. Prosecutors disagreed, saying Rob had gone beyond addiction and into intentional deceit. They pointed to fabricated documents and alleged schemes to misappropriate funds. The legal distinction was crucial. If his behavior came from compulsion, he might qualify for rehabilitation or diversion programs instead of jail. But if it was deliberate fraud, the consequences would be much harsher. The two narratives, illness versus moral guilt, clashed in public opinion, and emotions often outweighed logic. As the case continued, expert witnesses added layers of technical detail that complicated the story.